Emma Richardson sat by a tiny kitchen window, watching the first snowflakes of winter drift down like white feathers. The small cabin felt cold and empty. Just like her heart had been for the past years, once Emma had been the pride of her small English countryside village. She was the girl who could ride any horse, win any competition, and make her family proud. Everyone knew Emma Richardson. When she walked through the village streets, people would smile and wave. Children would run up to her, asking about her horses and begging for riding lessons. She was their local hero, their shining star who would one day compete in the Olympics. But everything changed that terrible day when Thunder, her beloved horse, stumbled during a jump. Emma remembered every detail of that moment. The morning had been perfect, with golden sunlight streaming across the training field. Thunder had been in excellent form, clearing every jump with grace and power. They were practicing for the biggest competition of Emma's career, one that could have opened doors to the national team. Then came the final jump. Thunder approached it with his usual confidence, but something went wrong. Maybe he was tired, or perhaps the ground was softer than expected. His front hooves caught the top rail, and both horse and rider came crashing down. Emma heard the sickening crack of her own leg breaking, but her first thought was for Thunder. The beautiful black stallion lay still on the ground, and Emma knew immediately that her best friend would never run again. The accident left Emma with a damaged leg that would never be quite the same. 3 surgeries and months of painful rehabilitation followed. The doctors did their best, but Emma would always walk with a slight limp. More importantly, she would never again have the perfect balance and strength needed for competitive riding. Her Olympic dreams died in that hospital room, along with a part of her soul. The medical bills had eaten away at everything she owned. Her beautiful horses were sold one by one to pay for the endless treatments and therapies. First went Starlight, her gentle mare who had taught her to jump. Then Midnight, the young stallion she had been training for dressage. Finally, even Thunder had to be put down. His injuries too severe to heal. Each sale broke Emma's heart a little more, but she had no choice. Her family had not been supportive. They had always thought horse riding was a foolish hobby, a waste of time and money. When Emma needed them most, they offered only criticism and lectures about getting a real job. Her father had said cruel words that still echoed in her mind. Maybe this accident is a blessing in disguise. Now you can stop this nonsense and do something useful with your life. Emma's friends slowly disappeared too. Without horses and competitions to share, they had little in common. The riding community that had once welcomed her now felt awkward and distant. Everyone pitied her, and Emma hated pity more than anything else. Now, at 28, she lived alone in this rundown cottage on the edge of the village. The small house had been her grandmother's, the only thing Emma had left after paying her debts. The roof leaked when it rained. The heating barely worked, and the walls were thin and cold. But it was hers, and it was shelter. Emma opened her cupboard and stared at the nearly empty shelves. 2 cans of beans, some stale bread, and a small bag of tea. That was all that stood between her and hunger. She had been living on 1 small meal a day for weeks, trying to make her few pounds last as long as possible. Her stomach growled constantly, and she felt weak and dizzy most of the time. There were jobs in the village, but none that Emma could do with her injured leg. The local farm needed workers, but the physical demands were too much for her. The shops wanted people who could stand for long hours, something Emma struggled with. She had applied everywhere, but each rejection felt like another door closing in her face. Her pride had kept her from asking for help, but pride wouldn't keep her warm or fed. Emma knew there were people in the village who would help her if she asked. Mrs. Henderson from the post office had hinted several times that Emma could come to her if she needed anything. The local church had a food bank that helped struggling families, but Emma couldn't bring herself to admit how desperate she had become. She looked at the photograph on her kitchen table. It showed her and Thunder after winning the regional championship 3 years ago. They both looked so happy, so full of hope and dreams. Emma touched the glass gently, remembering how Thunder's neck had felt warm and strong beneath her hands, how his ears had pricked forward with excitement before each jump outside. The snow was falling harder now. The flakes were bigger and wetter, the kind that would stick and build up quickly. Emma could hear the wind picking up, rattling the loose window frame and whizzing through the gaps round the door. Winter was coming early this year, and it would be long and harsh. Emma pulled her thin coat tighter round her shoulders and tried not to think about tomorrow. She had no idea how she would buy food, how she would heat the house, or how she would survive until spring. All she could do was take each day as it came and hope that somehow things would get better. The blizzard came without warning, turning the quiet country road into a wall of white. Emma had been watching the grey clouds all morning, but the weather forecast had promised only light snow. She should have stayed home, but her empty cupboards had forced her hand. She needed to reach the village market before the storm got worse. More importantly, she had to try to find work, any work, to buy food. Emma's old truck wheezed and coughed as she gripped the steering wheel with frozen fingers. The ancient vehicle had been her father's, passed down to her when he died 5 years ago. It had never been reliable, but now it was her only connection to the outside world. The heater barely worked, and cold air whistled through the cracked windows. She could see her breath forming small clouds as she drove. The snow was coming down harder now, thick flakes that stuck to the windshield faster than the old wipers could clear them away. Emma leaned forward, squinting through the glass, trying to make out the road ahead. The familiar landmarks were disappearing under a blanket of white. She had driven this road hundreds of times, but now it looked like an alien landscape. Her truck began to struggle more with each mile. The engine made strange grinding noises, and the vehicle lurched and jerked as if it were fighting against some invisible force. Emma pressed harder on the gas pedal, but the truck only responded with more violent shaking. She was still 3 miles from the village when she felt the engine losing power. "Come on," Emma whispered, patting the dashboard as if the truck were a tired horse that needed encouragement. "Just a little further. Please don't give up on me now." But the truck had other plans. With a final shudder and a loud bang, it died completely, rolling to a stop on the side of the empty road. Emma turned the key desperately, but nothing happened, not even a click. The silence was deafening, broken only by the howling wind and the soft patter of snow against the windows. Emma sat for a moment, trying not to panic. She was stranded on an empty road as snow swirled round her car like angry ghosts. The temperature was dropping fast, and she could already feel the cold creeping into the truck's cabin. Her thin coat and worn boots were no match for a blizzard. She had no mobile phone, no way to call for help. The nearest house was over a mile away, and in this weather, that might as well be 100 miles. The cold bit through her clothes like sharp teeth, making her shiver uncontrollably. She pulled her coat tighter and tried to think clearly, but panic began to set in. Her injured leg was already aching from the cold, and she knew she would only be able to walk far in the deep snow. The wind was getting stronger, rocking the small truck and piling snow against the windows. Emma closed her eyes and tried to calm herself. She had survived worse things than this. She had lived through the accident, through losing everything she loved, through months of pain and loneliness. Surely she could survive one winter storm. But as the minutes passed and the truck grew colder, her confidence began to fade. Just when she thought she might not make it, headlights cut through the storm like beacons of hope. A large vehicle was approaching slowly, its powerful engine purring through the wind. Emma felt tears of relief freeze on her cheeks as the vehicle pulled up behind her truck. A large, warm Range Rover stopped, and through the swirling snow, Emma saw a tall figure getting out. The man was well dressed in an expensive winter coat and sturdy boots. He moved with confidence, unafraid of the storm, and approached her truck with quick, purposeful steps. He tapped gently on her window, and Emma rolled it down with effort. Snowflakes immediately whirled into the truck. But she didn't care. Help had arrived. "You can't stay out here," he said simply, his voice calm and reassuring despite the howling wind. "I'm James Mitchell. Let me help you." Emma looked into his face and saw kind eyes and a gentle smile. There was something about him that made her feel safe immediately. He wasn't looking at her with the pity she had grown to hate, but with genuine concern and respect. Emma wanted to refuse, as she always did when people offered help. Her pride whispered that she should try to fix the truck herself, that she shouldn't burden this stranger with her problems. But the cold was too strong, and she was too tired to fight anymore. Sometimes survival mattered more than pride. James helped her from the truck, supporting her gently as her injured leg buckled in the deep snow. His Range Rover was warm and comfortable, with heated seats and soft music playing quietly. He handed her a thermos of hot tea that tasted like heaven after the bitter cold. As they drove through the storm toward his home, Emma learned that James owned the largest farm in 3 counties. His family had been in the area for generations, building up their land and reputation over decades. He was wealthy, successful, and everything she was not. By all rights, he should have been completely different from her, living in a world she could never understand. But there was something different about James. He didn't talk down to her or make her feel small. When he spoke, his voice carried the same quiet pain she knew so well. They were both survivors of something, though she didn't yet know what had wounded him. "Stay the night," James said as they reached his beautiful stone farmhouse. "The storm will pass, and we can figure things out in the morning." For the first time in months, Emma felt a tiny spark of hope warming her frozen heart. Morning brought clear skies and something Emma hadn't expected, an offer of work. She woke up in the comfortable guest room of James's farmhouse. Sunlight streaming through clean windows onto warm wooden floors. For a moment, she forgot where she was and why she was there. Then the memories of the previous night came flooding back. The broken truck, the blizzard, and James's unexpected kindness. Emma limped downstairs, her injured legs stiff from the cold and stress of the day before. She found James in the kitchen, making breakfast and humming quietly to himself. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air, making her stomach growl loudly. She felt embarrassed by the sound, but James pretended not to notice. "Good morning," he said with the same gentle smile from the night before. "I hope you slept well. The storm has passed completely." Through the kitchen window, Emma could see a world transformed by snow. Everything was clean and white and beautiful, sparkling like diamonds in the morning sun. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, this same landscape had been so dangerous and frightening. James had watched her gentle way with his horses during their brief meeting the evening before, when they had arrived at his farm. Emma had instinctively gone to the stable to check on the animals, worried that they might be frightened by the storm. Even in her exhausted state, she had moved among the horses with a natural grace that caught James's attention. The animals had responded to her immediately, coming under her soft voice and gentle touch. Now, As they sat down to breakfast, James saw something special in Emma that she had forgotten existed within herself. "I need someone who understands horses," James explained, pouring her a cup of hot coffee. "Not just someone who can feed them and clean their stalls, but someone who truly knows them. Someone who can see what they need and feel what they're thinking. Would you be willing to help me?" Emma's heart leaped at the offer. For the first time in 2 years, someone was asking her to do something she loved, something she was good at. But almost immediately, doubt crept in like a cold wind. She touched her injured leg unconsciously, feeling the ache that never quite went away. "I'm not the rider I used to be," she said quietly, looking down at her hands wrapped round the warm coffee cup. "I can't jump anymore, and I'm not fast or strong like I was before. I don't think I'm what you're looking for." James smiled, and his eyes were full of understanding. The best horse trainers aren't always the ones who can jump the highest or ride the fastest. Sometimes they're the ones who listen the closest, who pay attention to the small things that others miss. "I think you might be exactly what my horses need." Over the following weeks, Emma discovered that James was absolutely right, living in a small cottage on the edge of his property. She began working with his horses every day. Her injury had taught her patience and observation skills she'd never had before. When she couldn't rely on physical strength and perfect balance, she learned to use her mind and heart instead. She developed new training methods that worked with gentleness instead of force. Instead of demanding that horses obey through dominance, she learned to communicate with them as partners. She watched their body language, listened to their breathing, and paid attention to the tiny signals that showed how they were feeling. The horses responded to her like old friends, trusting her in ways that amazed even James. James watched her work with growing admiration. Every day, he saw Emma becoming more confident and happy. The sad, broken woman he had rescued from the storm was slowly transforming into someone vibrant and alive. Her laughter began to return, first in small chuckles when a young horse did something silly, then in full, joyful sounds that echoed through the stable. During the long winter evenings, James and Emma would sit by the fire in his warm kitchen, sharing stories and getting to know each other. James told her about losing his own father when he was just 16 years old. His father had died in a farming accident, leaving James to run the entire operation while still a teenager. He had built his success through determination and countless lonely nights, working harder than anyone else to prove he could carry on his family's legacy. Emma realized that wealth hadn't protected James from pain. It had just hidden it better. Behind his success and comfortable life, he carried the same kind of loneliness and loss that she knew so well. They were both people who had been forced to grow up too quickly, who had learned to be strong when they wanted to be weak. As winter deepened and the snow piled high around the farm, Emma found herself laughing again. She was earning honest money for the first time in years, doing work that mattered, work that made a difference. The horses needed her, and she needed them slowly. The frozen places in her heart began to thaw, like ice melting in the spring sun. But the best part was the friendship growing between her and James. They were healing each other, one conversation at a time. Emma learned to trust again, to believe that not everyone would leave her when things got difficult. James learned that having someone to share his life with made all his success meaningful in ways he had never imagined. For the first time since her accident, Emma began to believe that her life might have a future worth living. The worst storm in 20 years hit just before Christmas, arriving like an angry giant determined to destroy everything in its path. Emma woke up in her small cottage to the sound of wind howling like a wild beast, rattling her windows and shaking the walls. When she looked outside, She could barely see James's farmhouse through the swirling wall of white snow. The storm had been building for days, with weather reports warning of dangerous conditions, but nothing could have prepared them for the fury that nature unleashed that December night. Snow piled against the barn doors like frozen mountains, and the wind was so strong that it knocked over fences and sent farm equipment flying through the air like toys. Emma dressed quickly in her warmest clothes and struggled through the deep snow to reach the main farm. She found James already in the barn. His face tight with worry as he checked on the animals. The horses were restless and frightened, their eyes wide with fear as the storm raged outside. Some of the older animals were shivering despite their thick winter coats. James and Emma worked side by side through the long night, checking on every animal, making sure they were safe and warm. They moved hay bales to block the worst of the wind, brought extra blankets for the horses, and made sure all the water pipes were protected from freezing. Emma's injured leg ached terribly in the cold, but she pushed through the pain. These animals needed her, and she would not let them down. As they worked together in the dim light of the barn, sharing the weight of heavy feed bags and the responsibility of keeping dozens of animals alive, Emma felt something she had not experienced in years. She felt truly useful, truly needed, not because someone pitied her or wanted to help her, but because she had skills and knowledge that made a real difference. During a brief rest round midnight, as they sat on hay bales sharing hot coffee from a thermos, Emma found herself talking about things she had never shared with anyone. The storm seemed to create a safe bubble round them, a place where secrets could be told and dreams could be spoken aloud. Emma shared her deepest dream with James, the one she had carried in her heart even through the darkest days after her accident. She had always wanted to create a place where people with disabilities could experience the joy and healing that comes from working with horses. She knew from her own experience how much animals could help heal broken hearts and damaged spirits. I used to imagine it so clearly, Emma said softly, her voice barely audible over the wind. A special ranch where people like me could come to work with horses, not as patients or charity cases, but as partners, where they could learn that being different doesn't mean being less. I wanted to call it New Beginnings Ranch. James listened with his whole heart, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished speaking, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at her with eyes full of understanding and respect. That's not just a dream, Emma, he said firmly. That's a calling. That's something the world needs, and you're exactly the right person to make it happen. When morning finally came, the storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by snow and ice. As they surveyed the damage, James and Emma discovered something amazing. Emma's quick thinking and deep knowledge of the land had saved several animals that might have been lost. She had known exactly which shelters would be safest, which animals needed extra protection, and how to arrange everything for maximum safety. James realized in that moment that Emma wasn't just an employee or even a friend. She was the missing piece that made his ranch complete. Her skills, her intuition, and her deep love for animals had turned his successful but somewhat cold business into something warm and alive. But Emma was struggling with something else. Something that had been growing in her mind for weeks. All her life, she had been independent and strong. Even as a child, she had hated asking for help or admitting she couldn't do something on her own. Accepting help from James felt like giving up, like admitting she wasn't enough on her own. The feeling had been building as she watched James's easy generosity, his comfortable wealth, his ability to solve problems simply by spending money. She began to feel small and useless in comparison, like a burden he was carrying out of kindness. I don't want to be a charity case, she told James one evening as they sat by his fireplace. tears filling her eyes. "I don't want you to help me, just because you feel sorry for me. I've been taking care of myself my whole life, and I don't want to become someone who depends on other people's pity." James looked at her with surprise and something that might have been hurt. He reached out and took her hands gently, his touch warm and reassuring. "Emma," he said quietly, "you've given me more than I've given you before you came here. This place was just a business to me. It made money, but it didn't have soul. You've brought life back to this place. You've reminded me what it means to have purpose beyond just making money. You've shown me that success without meaning is just expensive loneliness, if anyone's receiving charity here. It's me." Emma looked into his sincere eyes and began to understand something important. True strength doesn't always mean doing everything alone. Sometimes it means letting others help us reach our dreams, and sometimes it means helping others reach theirs. Spring came early that year, bringing with it warm sunshine, green grass, and a proposal that would change everything. The harsh winter had finally ended, leaving behind memories of storms survived and friendships deepened. Emma had grown stronger during those cold months, not just in body but in spirit. She walked with more confidence now, and her laughter came more easily. James had spent the winter months working on something special, something he had kept secret from Emma. During the long evenings when she thought he was just reading or handling farm business, he had actually been making phone calls, drawing up plans, and meeting with architects and lawyers. He had a vision, and he was determined to make it real. On a beautiful April morning, when the air smelled of fresh flowers and new beginnings, James asked Emma to join him in his kitchen. The room was filled with golden sunlight, and outside the window she could see horses grazing peacefully in the green fields. It was the kind of morning that made anything seem possible. "I want to show you something," James said, his voice filled with excitement and nervousness. He spread papers across the kitchen table, documents that had been carefully prepared and organized. Emma looked down and saw architectural drawings, budget sheets, legal contracts, and detailed business plans. "I want to be your partner," James said, his words coming out in a rush as if he had been practicing them for weeks. "Not your boss, not your helper, but your equal partner. We'll combine our resources and create the therapeutic writing center you've dreamed of. You'll run the programs, design the treatments, and work with the people who need help. I'll handle the business side, the finances, and all the paperwork that makes everything legal and official." Emma stared at the detailed plans spread before her. There were drawings of a beautiful new barn designed specifically for a therapeutic riding, with wide doors for wheelchairs and special equipment for people with different disabilities. There were budgets showing exactly how much money would be needed and where it would come from. There were contracts that spelled out exactly how the partnership would work, making it clear that Emma would own half of everything. It was everything she had ever wanted, presented not as charity or a gift, but as a true partnership between equals. James had taken her dream and turned it into a real possibility, complete with every detail worked out and every problem solved. "Why would you do this?" Emma whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. For so long, her dream had seemed impossible, something she thought about late at night, but never expected to achieve. James looked at her with eyes full of sincerity and affection. "Because you taught me that success without purpose is just expensive loneliness," he replied. "I had money and land and everything I thought I wanted, but I didn't have meaning. You showed me what it feels like to do work that actually matters, to help others instead of just helping myself. And because I believe in your dream as much as I believe in you." Emma felt tears running down her cheeks, but for the first time in years, They were tears of joy instead of sadness. She looked at the man who had rescued her from the storm and had somehow become her closest friend and truest partner. Together, they could make something beautiful happen. The next 6 months passed in a blur of activity. Construction workers arrived to build the new facilities. Emma worked with architects to make sure every detail was perfect for the people who would use the center. James handled the legal work and the money, making sure everything was done properly and safely. Emma interviewed horses, choosing the gentlest and most patient animals for the therapeutic program. She studied new techniques and attended training, courses to learn the latest methods for helping people with disabilities. Most importantly, she began reaching out to families and doctors, letting them know that soon there would be a place where healing and hope could happen. Together. Finally, New Beginnings Ranch opened its doors on a crisp October morning. Emma stood in the center of the beautiful new arena, wearing clean riding clothes and feeling more proud than she had ever felt in her life. The building smelled of fresh wood and clean hay, and sunlight streamed through the big windows, making everything glow with warmth. She watched as their first group of visitors arrived. There was a young boy with cerebral palsy who had never been able to walk independently. There was a teenage girl who had lost her leg in a car accident and thought she would never ride again. There was an elderly man whose stroke had left him weak and discouraged. Emma held her breath as the young boy was introduced to a gentle horse named Hope, with help from Emma and a team of volunteers. The boy took his first independent steps while holding onto Hope's halter. His mother cried with joy, and Emma felt her heart swell with pride and purpose. Her own journey from despair to purpose had led her to help others find their own new beginnings. The accident that had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something far more meaningful than she had ever imagined. She was no longer just a rider competing for her own glory. Now she was a healer, helping others discover their own strength and courage. As James joined her in the center of the arena, both of them watching the magic happen round them, Emma understood something important. Sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest gifts to the world. The pain that breaks us can also teach us how to help others heal. In the distance, children's laughter mixed with the gentle sounds of horses, creating a symphony of hope that echoed across the green fields of their shared dream. The end.